Voice for the people. And my guest today is Professor Iskel gabisaa. We are going to talk about Ethiopian federalism. Please stay with us. What is federalism and how does it differ from other governance system common in the world?
Federalism is a system of governance. Depending on the state formation system or the evolution of the state historically, it's a form of governance where the center is weak and the regions or the federal units exercise autonomy from the center. But in general, it's about separation of power between the center or the federal state and the federal units exercise legally differentiated powers. The regions, based on the constitution that undergirds the federal system, the law differentiates between the powers that are assigned to the center and to the regions. Also, the way that the federalism itself evolved determines how much power is devolved into the regions and how much power is reserved for the center or for the federal structure. In some places like the United States, where you have coming together federalism, that is to say, the federal units actually come together, they are the sovereign states and they come together and arrogate certain powers to the federal government. In that case, the federal units are stronger in terms of their sovereignty and the levels of power that they exercise.
And what do you say about Ethiopian federalism? Because some call it ethnic federalism and others call it linguistic federalism and even fake federalism. What do you say on this?
Federalism is that there is a structure of federalism. There is a constitution that actually puts together the federalist structure itself, but it's not implemented, so it is fake. So I understand it from that perspective that people are trying to derisively describe the fact that there is federalism or a federal arrangement on paper in Ethiopia, but it's not been implemented. In that sense, you could say it's a fake federalism. But there is no governing structure known as fake federalism. Linguistic federalism, probably if the federal structure is built on following the settlement of people speaking the same language, might be referred to as linguistic. I think in our case, ethnicity in itself is considered a backward state, a primordial state. So it's people who use the word or the description ethnic federalism are not describing it in a good way. It's a contemptuous reference. The Ethiopian federal system is a multinational structure. It's a multinational arrangement. That is to say, if it was only linguistic, is drawn simply following the language or the language spoken by the people, then some of the people that are in Amara region who speak the Oromo language should be part of Oromia, but they are not. So it is language primarily, but it's also settlement pattern of people who speak certain language. So it is a multinational federation. That is the appropriate description of Ethiopia's federalism. And it has actually a historical root to it. It's not something that is simply pulled from thin air. There was a question of nations and nationalities in Ethiopia, and the federal system is a response to that question, of the question of nations and nationalities. As a response to that historic question, it is a multinational federation, both in terms of its historical origin and as an appropriate description of Ethiopia's federal system. It is a multinational federation.
Do you mean that Ethiopian federalism is best for Ethiopia right now?
At this point in time, yes. The other alternative is what we have tried. What we have tried is a unitary system in which, following policies that the multinational people of Ethiopia were forced to accept language, identity, way of life, that under the Emperor Haile Selassie, the policy of the country was to assimilate the different peoples of Ethiopia into what they considered an Ethiopianness, what they considered to be an Ethiopia, which is, from their perspective, or from what they wanted to do, from their perspective, is an identity that is greater than the constituent parts. What that simply means is that there is an emerging national culture, which happened to be the culture of the Amharic-speaking people. So all other peoples in Ethiopia were, through education, through cultural representation, through media, through other means, were supposed to be assimilated into one culture. So that culture, that one national culture, precipitated a unitary system. A unitary system where power is held by an autocrat and not shared by other forces. That was the system, a unitary system of governance with probably some administrative divisions. But administrative divisions do not have their own autonomy. There is no regional autonomy. It's simply to make sure administration is laid down, control is held. Otherwise, it was a unitary structure that we had until the Derg, until the end of the Derg. So that is the option that we had, which is an option that didn't work. But like I was saying earlier, that there was a historic question in this country. For the last 50 or maybe more than that, about 60 years, there were two questions that roiled politics in this country, that shaped the politics in this country. One is the land question, the land to the tiller question. The other is the nationalities question. If we were to respond to that, the option that we have is the federal structure responding to the specific question of nationalities. In that respect, the federal structure was the most suitable arrangement for Ethiopia to address both the preservation of the country as a whole, as one whole, but also assign some powers to the regions and the nations and the nationalities. According to the Constitution of Ethiopia, the sovereignty lies in the nations. So it's a response. So at this point in time where we stand, over the last 27 years, the multinational federation was a response to a historic question of the Oromo people, of the Somali people, of the Afar people. It was a response to the question of nationalities. Now, in the future, we evolve, we're not the same. In the future, there might come a time when rearrangement of the federal system might be needed, some 30 years, 40 years into the future. But at this point in time, in order to respond to the historic questions of the nations and nationalities in Ethiopia, as far as governance is concerned, even when the consciousness and the identity question of nations and nationalities in Ethiopia is really heightened, at this point in time, multinational federation is the most appropriate governance structure.
And some argue that Ethiopian federalism is cause for ethnic conflicts. Do you agree with this?
I don't. I don't agree that people as a people, simply people as a people, would want to go to conflict because they live under a federal structure. The cause of conflict is economic. The cause of conflict is land. The cause of conflict of any conflict is basically resource. Now the federal structure is new. The borders are porous. They're not well drawn, and even those drawn on the map were not demarcated. So when the change occurred in this country, meaning in the last year or 2 years, when change occurred, when democratization made it possible for people to air their grievances, in the absence of a clear roadmap of where we're going, everybody was jockeying for power, for gaining control over resources. Those are the causes of conflict. If we had a program of transition that was clear, then the jockeying for power that actually leads to conflict would not have occurred. Secondly, the conflict is actually elite driven. It's politicians driven. It's not conflict between people. Federalism per se. Federalism is not a cause. It cannot be a cause. It cannot. But except that it was not really implemented fully, and we have not really defined the borders between the regional states. We haven't even gotten into a conversation, national conversation, between the nations that inhabit the different regions. Because of those things, the conflict reducing or conflict prevention mechanisms were not put in place. The state is overstretched to stand between conflicting or warring parties everywhere. So essentially conflict is about competition over power, economic power and political power. There are also ethnic entrepreneurs who are trying to advance private cause, considering everything that they're doing a public charge. Other than that, federalism in and of itself is actually the most appropriate power-sharing arrangement that is suitable to Ethiopia. This is simply bad-mouthing it. So people who do not want federalism to take place, to take root, are assigning that a look at it, that everywhere there is conflict. So let's dismantle the constitution of Ethiopia. Let's dismantle the federal arrangement and go where? Back where? That's the question. Go back to the unitary system that didn't work? I mean, doing the same thing over and over again is the ultimate sign of insanity. So I don't think federalism is the cause of conflict.
If there is any who aspires to restore unitary system to this country, do you think that this is achievable?
We have done it before, as I was saying earlier. What was the result of the policy of assimilation that was trying to create one nation in Ethiopia out of the many nations and nationalities and peoples in Ethiopia? What was the result? We know what the result is. The result is the creation of liberation organizations all around Ethiopia. The Afar Liberation Front, the Somali Liberation Front, or the Ogaden Liberation Front, the Oromo Liberation Front, the Sidama Liberation Front, the Gambela Liberation Front. That's what it created. A unitary system is not appropriate for Ethiopia. What is appropriate for Ethiopia is a response to the questions. Today, I do not know any liberation organization that is espousing secessionism. None. To some extent, the federal system, the fact that people were able to speak in their own language in their own regions, that they were able to enrich their own cultures in their own regions, has proved that the multinational federation actually works in Ethiopia. What remains to be seen is, what I think is actually appropriate, is that the multinational federation, which gave the cultural space to the nation nationalities, should be extended to the political and economic realm. So that's what I think about the federal system here.
Some politicians argue that countries under federal system relatively democratic and peaceful. And do you agree on this?